The Israeli military has closed off more or less the entire area adjacent to the Gaza Strip, but Sderot is a relatively big city, and it has tried to evacuate as many people as possible. So 80% of the people living in Sderot have been evacuated because everyone is waiting for this ground offensive that Israel has announced it will launch. And whenever Israel does that, it will be dangerous, to put it mildly, to stay in Sderot. So Israel is trying to evacuate people, and in the meantime, it's preparing for this ground offensive. But of course, as you mentioned, the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza has delayed Israel's offensive, and it's mainly because of international pressure on Israel from the United States and, of course, the United Nations.
And Jotam, what are you seeing there in Sderot, where you are? And secondly, what's the mood amongst Israelis? Do they understand or care about the scale of this humanitarian crisis?
So, first of all, if I start with the first question, the city of Sderot is relatively empty, as you can see now. It's a relatively big city, but as you can see, you can't see, some of you are listening to this, but it's a very, very empty city other than military, journalists, and police. And where we are right now is further into the city, but we just came from one of the junctions where all you see are just military convoys on their way to the Gaza border. And in terms of how Israelis feel about this, I would say this is such a national trauma that Israel is trying to heal and to get through, that Israel is simply prioritizing wiping out Hamas, and it keeps saying it is not Israel's responsibility to protect civilians. Hamas is the sovereign in Gaza, and when we ask them to leave and Hamas asks them to stay, that's all we can do, really. And this is just the Israeli side. It's not my opinion. This is what Israelis think. Israel feels like so many red lines have been crossed because of the atrocities committed by Hamas that it simply has basically no patience left for Gaza. But of course, like I mentioned, pressure from the United States, pressure from the UN, and Egypt, of course, have now at least made Israel turn on the water again, as in allowing water in. And now we're waiting for final confirmation for humanitarian aid to finally get in from the Egyptian side of the border into Gaza.
And Yotam, are there not concerns in Israel about the situation worsening, expanding? I mean, at the Lebanese border, the Israeli military, I think, are evacuating 28 communities within 2 kilometers of it, which suggests that they're expecting attacks from Hezbollah in reprisal. That's just within the region. And of course, that spreads even wider.
Absolutely. I would say Israelis are much more concerned about what happens on the Lebanese border than they are on what happens on the Gaza border. They're very, very concerned because Hezbollah is a completely different kind of organization. It's much stronger than Hamas. It has roughly 150,000 rockets, including long-range rockets, that can reach pretty much all of Israel. And we've already seen these exchanges of fire between Hezbollah and Israel, which has caused lives on both the Lebanese side and also the Israeli side. That's why Joe Biden keeps repeating to Israel's enemies, such as Hezbollah and Iran, if you're thinking about taking advantage of the situation, don't. And that's why we also hear now in the Israeli media that Joe Biden is actually due to arrive in Israel. That will send a very, very strong signal, not so much to Hamas, but it's more a signal to Hezbollah. We know that, for example, the United States Navy is now in the Mediterranean and ready to help Israel should another northern front fully erupt, a full-scale war between Hezbollah and Israel. So that's actually the main concern in Israel right now, that Israel will be dragged into a war in Lebanon.
It's a difficult situation for Joe Biden as well, though, for President Joe Biden, because I presume he doesn't want to be in Israel while a massacre is occurring in Gaza.
Absolutely. For him, it's first of all, it's a disaster because American citizens are in Gaza. So he has a national security priority, which is to try and get them out, and also the Palestinians with American citizenship to get them out. That's his national security priority. Other than that, of course, he has also an interest in lowering the civilian casualty on the Gaza inside Gaza. So he's in a huge dilemma because he has, on the one hand, he has to give his unsolicited support to Israel, but on the other hand, he has to act as the responsible superpower, trying to simply end this war if it can be ended. It hasn't even really begun yet. We haven't seen the ground offensive yet. So Joe Biden is really in an impossible situation. But of course, as expected, he is supporting Israel as much as possible and hinting, stressing however you want to phrase it, that Israel needs to abide by international law.
You said end this war. Is there any sense that the war could be ended? I mean, there was talk of is there any sense that this invasion could be prevented? That there was talk of there being a truce in southern Gaza, but Israel has said that there won't be now. We're still waiting, I think, for news of what may happen at the Rafah border with Egypt, where the world's eyes are focused in the hope that some Palestinians from Gaza will be able to escape, at least the sick and the young. The humanitarian situation has obviously worsened. Are there any of these elements that might stop the full-scale invasion taking place?
I would say there's a 1% chance that might happen. I cannot see any scenario in which Israel will halt the ground offensive that has prepared for about 10 days now. It's simply, I honestly don't think it's possible. Of course, I'm not a crystal ball and I'm not in the army, so I don't know what they're actually planning. But I do know that they, every single day, from the defense minister to the prime minister to the army, stress that Hamas will be eliminated inside Gaza and a ground offensive will happen. So again, I absolutely don't see how this can be avoided. Whether it's going to last for months or weeks, that's a whole different issue.
Jotam, you have been a crystal ball for us over the last few months insofar as you've made very clear that temperatures have been rising as a result of a lot of Netanyahu's policies, aside from anything else. And I wonder now what your opinion is on the end game. I mean, the Israeli Defense Force spokesperson said yesterday that it was a difficult question to answer. And that in itself seemed quite a worrying expression of where it's headed. I mean, do Israelis know what they want from this invasion, aside from revenge for Hamas's horrific terrorist attacks? But I mean, Israel has been trying to wipe out Hamas for decades now. The idea that it would suddenly overnight be possible seems a misnomer.
Well, first of all, nobody thinks it's going to happen overnight. Even the military keeps saying this is going to take a long time. But what happens the day after Hamas is removed from power? I think it's the same question that we could have asked, or we did ask, when the United States invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. What happens the day after? Nobody actually really knows. There's not a plan in place. The only thing Israel has said so far is that it has no interest in occupying Gaza. Again, that remains to be seen. If you invade and you eradicate Hamas, what do? Do you just pull out? You can't just pull out. You have to have someone who governs in there. So that's a very contradictory statement, number one. And number two, whether Israel wants to install the Palestinian Authority in there, is that even possible? I don't think the Palestinian Authority would actually really like that, because it would be seen as collaborating with Hamas, with Israel. So it's an absolute, there is no plan really for the day after. The only plan right now is to wipe out Hamas, and then I assume the Israelis will try and come up with some sort of plan for what they'll do after.